2009, Gizzi was a free man, but the police were watching him.
Very quickly, from release from prison, he was into supplying controlled drugs.
Police launched Operation Thunder. Gerwyn Lloyd was the senior investigating officer.
To prosecute somebody, suspicion's not good enough. We have to prove that this is actually what was taking place. So over a long period of time, and I knew from the outset that it would take us a long period of time to gather the evidence necessary, I wanted to show the extent and the scale of this drug supply enterprise that he was the head of.
A team of officers worked full-time for 12 months investigating Gizzi and his associates. Gradually, detectives built up a picture of the criminal enterprise Gizzi was running.
Essentially, we had John Gizzi at the top of the organisation. He would call the shots. He then had two trusted lieutenants, which were essentially Christian Suckley and Carl Evans. And they were kind of geographically located, if you like, in as much as Carl Evans would run the Rill side of the business and Christian Suckley the Abergele side. They would run those areas on behalf of John Gizzi. And then below them were the people, the foot soldiers, the couriers, the people that had to run things around, that had to carry out tasks on their behalf.
This is the moment Gizzi, in the silver car, was caught on camera, handing £29,000 in cash to one of his associates. Officers gathered the evidence to prove it was a deal for Class A drugs. Gizzi's gang were bringing high-purity drugs into Wales. Detectives knew the drugs were being processed, but where? From a helicopter, they filmed two of his associates on the roof of an industrial unit just outside Rhyl. Inside, hundreds of cannabis plants. The police investigation would also take officers to the heart of the drugs trade in Britain.
The drugs cartels which operate out of Liverpool are probably the biggest in Britain, and they're probably up there with the biggest in Europe.
Police had intelligence that while in prison the first time, Gizzi was making contacts with criminals from Merseyside. Graham Johnson is a crime reporter and has written books about the drug and gang culture in Liverpool. He says Gizzi was well connected.
Well, he's not an importer, he's a distributor. He doesn't have to import because all the hard work has been done by the Liverpool Mafia. So he's a kind of mid-ranking distributor, but within his league he's a big player. He's probably be able to get high purity cocaine, which is difficult to get, and you've got to have good contacts. You'll be able to distribute it well and come back with the money to pay for it.
With his connections, Gizzi's gang were taking cocaine from Liverpool across the border to North Wales.
It's a great place to sell drugs. It's a big market. North Wales, you know, behind the kind of chocolate box image of it being a kind of a countryside place where people go on holiday, there's lots of poor areas with a high demand for Class A drugs, you know, in Wrexham and Mould and, you know, those big estates. You know, that's good news if you're a drug dealer. Because there isn't really any big cities like Manchester or Liverpool there, you haven't got that guns and gang culture, which is going to take your security costs very, very high. So, you know, he's onto a winner, and I'm not surprised that John Gizzi made a lot of money and was very powerful within that community.
It was on one of these drug runs along the A55 that the police decided to act. After months of gathering intelligence, surveillance and forensics, they were ready for strike day.
We knew drugs were coming in from Merseyside, and some of the main players were involved on that day. What we didn't know was exactly how it was going to happen, and therefore the challenge on that day was to try and identify where the drugs had been sourced and how they were going to be brought into North Wales.
In April last year, the team had intelligence that the gang were planning to hide drugs in a taxi. Members of Gizzi's group would then follow it from Liverpool to North Wales, but the police were ready to move.
It was, you know, the culmination, if you like, of months and months of work all coming together. We had the final icing on the cake in terms of evidence against this organised crime group.
Inside the taxi, they found nearly a kilo of high-purity cocaine. Once processed, it would have a street value of £162,000. Police had their evidence, but as his associates were arrested, John Damon Gizzi went on the run.
I'm convinced that he knew at that point that the game was up. Something must have spooked him to the point where he wanted to run away.
Within a week, police had caught up with him. For operational reasons, we can't identify this officer.
As he was arrested and being placed into the back of the van, his last words were, "Let me just take one last breath of fresh air, because I'm looking at 10 years for this." And then he was put in the van and brought to North Wales for questioning.
State your full name and date of birth, please.
John Damon Gizzi, 5571.
OK, obviously still under caution. You don't have to say anything, but may harm your defence if you do not mention, when questioned, something which you later rely in court. Anything you do say may be given evidence, do you understand?
During 2 days of police interviews, Gizzi refused to respond to questioning.
And the bag contained £29,000 in cash. What do you know about this money? Was that the first time you met on that day? Did you pass it? Have you met him before? Where did you get it from? You spoke to him on the phone before? What was it for? Who's introduced you to each other? What do you know about those drugs? You've got out your vehicle. Why have you got out? Were any of those drugs intended to come to you? Speaking to the driver through an open window. What were you talking about?
I just think basically he liked living the lifestyle that he did. He liked the being branded with the fact that he thought he was some kind of gangster, you know, dealing drugs. He was the big I am, and it was the attention, you know, the I am John Gizzi, look at me, basically.
On the day his trial was due to start, Gizzi pleaded guilty to conspiracy to bring Class A drugs into North Wales.
We got so many of the players as well, and we got the couriers from Liverpool because initially John Gizzi was our main target, and we ended up with 10 in the cells, and we've ended up with 10 convictions.
They seem to think that they're untouchable. They go around thinking that they're untouchable, can't be caught. Well, I've got news for them. They're not untouchable. We can catch them, and we will catch them.
For Gizzi, this chapter of his story ends at court. It's judgment day for John Damon Gizzi and his gang because they are about to find out just how long they're going to serve in prison for their drug dealing operation. One by one, they arrive at court. But things don't go quite to plan. We've been in the court 2 hours. There does seem to be a really tense atmosphere in there, Chris, and there's also a delay. Do you know what's happening?
Well, there is quite a bit of tension there, I think, with the defendants. There's 10 defendants, so we have a bit of a logistics problem. The security issues around the courtroom, of course, putting 10 people in the dock at the same time can be tricky, but the tension is people waiting, the expectation of what may happen and what the outcomes may be. I think, you know, when you associate John Gizzi from North Wales with many of these issues, then there's always a twist and a turn, which makes it interesting, but makes it also difficult.
After a day and a half of waiting, it was time. A few minutes ago, John Damon Gizzi was sentenced to 11 years in prison. Judge Mervyn Hughes QC told the defendants that those who choose to involve themselves in the supply of Class A drugs must know that if they are caught, they must expect serious terms of imprisonment. So a long stretch for Gizzi, and collectively the gang were jailed for 66 years. Even his foot soldiers got at least 4 years. For the retired detective who spent much of his career investigating Gizzi, satisfaction.
I feel very pleased. I think the sentencing reflects the severity of the crimes. 11 years for Mr Gizzi is a good sentence. I think for the man who said he'd never spend a day behind bars, has now spent or will have spent more time behind bars than probably anybody else in Rhyl. which is quite rewarding for the police team who have been involved in this investigation.
You spoke last time about taking the Rolex off his wrist, the rings off his fingers. This does seem personal to you. Is there an element of satisfaction seeing him locked up today for 11 years?
I think there's great satisfaction, not just for me personally, but for the whole police team involved. It's been a long, hard road, the last 18 months of covert policing, which is very intense policing, very difficult at times, quite political at times when there's no obvious arrests, there's no frontline visibility. So it's difficult to manage it in those respects. So to get a result like we've had today is quite rewarding.
But he's been to prison before, and within months of his release he was running a drugs ring. This time police have applied for a serious crime prevention order, which would place conditions on Gizzy after he's released. It's only the second time it's been used in Wales.
What we seek to achieve as part and parcel of the ongoing management of these people on their release from prison are serious crime prevention orders, which hopefully will go some way to putting restrictions on their lifestyles so that they can't reorganise themselves in the manner in which that they've been committing crime hitherto. And hopefully those orders, when they're heard next before a court, will be granted so that they come into effect when these people come out of prison.
But the demand for drugs is still there. Will someone else now take Gizzy's place?
I think this is always a tempting thing, isn't it? Because of the profits that people can make from dealing with these drugs. Massive amounts of money can be made. But I think this conviction today of all these people and the sentences that have been imposed will send out a really strong message to those people who are thinking about filling Gizzy's shoes, of taking it upon themselves to get involved in serious and organised crime, particularly in the supply of controlled drugs into North Wales. They stand to be the next people that we will be taking on as part of our investigations.
Some say he's already been replaced.
Next day, within hours of him being taken off the streets, either one of his gang will have taken over, or one of the Liverpool gangs will have moved in. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if there's someone serving up large amounts of drugs in North Wales at the moment.
Police are now investigating how much money the gang made. For the people of Rhyl, the Gizzy years have left their mark.
Well, anyone who headlines the town for because of crime does us harm, especially drugs. This is a family resort. John Gizzy helped to give the place a kicking that it didn't deserve. He front-paged us with drug stories and crime and all the rest of it. And this is where he grew up, this is where his people are. And I think he needs to make amends to the community in some way. He owes us.
John Damon Gizzy may have gone, but the social problems he exploited in Rhyl remain. This seaside town's darker days may not yet be over. Are frail older people being failed by Welsh hospitals?
Did they know what was wrong with my mother? Did they even notice she was there? Had she been put in the corner just to keep it out of the way?
That's Week In, Week Out, next week.
And that's at the same time next week here on BBC One Wales.
Understand.